What is going on, all you wonderful A-plusers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again with another Kamen Rider review, this time taking a look at Saber, episode 6, an episode that I am honestly very mixed on, and it'll be for reasons that I'll get into when I talk about it, but basically it was a very well written episode, but there was just one aspect about it that just angered me all the way through while watching this, and we'll definitely talk about it once we get into this episode, but before we get started, I do want to say a couple quick things. First of all, I definitely apologize for this late upload. Normally I try to have these up Tuesdays, like early afternoon, in order to have the Toku Tuesday thing going on that Adam and I are doing, but unfortunately it did not play out that way this week, and so I definitely want to apologize for that. Second thing I wanted to bring up is that while you will hear me ranting a lot this episode about the things I didn't like, these are at the end of the day just my A+ opinions. We of course always want to know what you guys think of the episode, so definitely let us know in the comments below. I know I usually say that for last, but I wanted to bring that up early this episode just because I'm curious if anyone else was as annoyed about the thing in this episode that I will get to as I was. But with all that being said, let's get right into this. We get a cool opening scene with Touma just kind of contemplating his beliefs about books, because he's always seen books as this thing to constantly give people joy and happiness and all that kind of thing. So it's now like just a weird struggle for him now, realizing that books are now being used for evil by the villains who are trying to use the Wonder Ride book specifically for their own selfish desires. So it was kind of an interesting moment from him. It's kind of like, I think to some extent, like anything that we're technically like we're really passionate about, can have a bit of toxicity to it, and it kind of makes you rethink your whole thing. I think a lot of fandoms are like that. We then get to the new character that gets introduced in this episode. It's a guy named Ren. Ren is an asshole in this episode. This is the thing I was going to mention that I absolutely hated in the episode, and it's funny too, because first introduction, he seems like a really optimistic, fun-going dude at first. He comes out of the training room and he's super excited, all pumped up, ready for action. In like kind of a sense, his personality kind of reminded me of the Silver Gokaiger Ranger. But then he starts to talk, and this is where I wanted to punch him so much throughout the entire episode. We get a scene where Touma simply is about to shake his hand, and the dude shakes his head and goes, "No way, dude, you're a scrub," and essentially just judges Touma before even really getting to know him, like the entire episode. What was also really cool is the very next scene. We get to really know Tetsuo's personality a little bit more. We saw before that he's basically the blacksmith of the Wonder Ride group, but we didn't quite know exactly what it does. We knew he didn't exactly create the swords, but we weren't exactly sure how it is that he works on the swords, other than the fact that he scans them with his computer. But what's interesting in this episode is there's kind of a reveal that he really feels a connection with the swords, and he views the swords more as living creatures than just simple weaponry. That was something I thought was really cool. We have Touma and Ren kind of getting into this discourse on what they think is better when it comes to being a warrior, whether or not it's strength or knowledge, which is something I find really weird, because Ren is supposed to be a ninja, and most of the times when you think of ninjas, you usually don't think of brute strength. You think of like, stealth, strategic movements. Usually ninjas don't fight with brute strength alone. They usually rely a lot more on skills, so it is weird that this is a guy who says that battle is all about strength the entire episode. So they're going through this argument, but then they get a call from Kento, who's informing them that there are still a few loose piranhas out there, and he needs their help taking him down. So Touma goes out to assist him, but then we get Disaster, who's out there on the battlefield, which really confused me, because if I remember correctly, the last time we saw him, he was about to get into a battle with Zuos, if I remember correctly. So I thought it was weird that he just happened to be out here on this battlefield. We don't really get an explanation for how he escaped or what happened. There's just kind of this big gap between the previous episode and everything that happened with Rintaro's storyline. It's kind of like there's just this big gap, so where that storyline left off isn't exactly where this episode picks up. Kind of a nitpick, I guess, about this episode, but I'll get a little more into that later on. So Touma, of course, destroys the piranha, not really with that much of a effort, honestly, but he discovers that there's someone else there on the battlefield, someone he doesn't recognize, so he goes to help this guy out, or just try to check on him to make sure he's okay. But he turns out to be another villain, and this time this villain, what he does is he curses Touma's sword, making it so he can no longer transform, and this becomes kind of Touma's thing throughout the episode. The villain is about to retreat, but he tells Touma that the only way he can fix his power is to find, I believe it was called the lost place, something like that, but yeah, it's basically the only way he can revive himself and his abilities. Meanwhile, Disaster does take the Wonder Ride book that Touma was given in the previous episode, and then of course he retreats. This, of course, gives me another scene of why I really hate Ren in this episode, because Ren, rather than being sympathetic about Touma losing a very important piece of material that belongs to the, entire crew, he decides to make fun of him and say, "You lost the important Wonder Ride book that Ogami entrusted to you. Oh man, you must feel like an absolute loser." Oh man, I hate Ren this episode. I really hate Ren this whole episode. But of course, Touma is very mature about it, so rather than getting on him, all he does is simply ask for Ren to go after Disaster in his absence, since, Touma is now cursed and can't possibly transform into the Kamen Rider anymore. What I really like about this is, of course, Ren is just kind of like being smug about it. He's just like, you want me to get back the book that you lost? And Touma's just kind of simply like, no, I want you to save people. That's it. It's not about, you fixing my mistakes. It's about you doing your duty as a Kamen Rider, looking out for those who can't look out for themselves. So it's actually really funny. As much as I really disliked Ren in this episode, Ren's attitude and just the way that Touma kind of handled it actually made me enjoy Touma as a character a lot more in a way. So I guess that's one way. If you as a writer need to find some some way to trick your audience into liking a character even more, just put him next to an annoying character that you want to punch in the face. There you go, that's the trick. So the two of them arrive, but of course there turns out to be another piranha, but that piranha gets destroyed instantly. So while essentially Ren and Kento are going to destroy Disaster, Touma and Tetsuo stay behind in the building in order to do some research on this lost place that the villain was talking about. We then cut to Rentaro, and we finally pick up where his story kind of left off, with him about to get into a all-out battle with Zuos, and the two of them both transform into their forms, and we get a really surprising reveal here. We find out that Zuos actually killed Rentaro's mentor. Because of this, we get what might have been the most epic fight with Rentaro in Kamen Rider Saber. Essentially, he's no longer fighting using only skill, he's actually fighting just using essentially just pure emotion, just pure anger, going at this guy, with all his strength, but not being able to think as clearly. Because of this, the fight unfortunately ends up a bit one-sided, with Zuos having essentially the upper hand. Cutting back to the fight with Ren and Disaster, I gotta ask, is it bad that I'm kind of rooting for Disaster in this fight? Just curious. Unfortunately, Ren does, of course, end up defeating Disaster and getting the Wonder Ride book back, but then we cut back to Rentaro as he's fighting the man that killed his master, and unfortunately, things aren't going so well. We get a really surprising, I almost want to say out of character, but not out of character in a way that makes no sense, more of out of character in a way of the way we all can be out of character sometimes when we let the emotions get the best of us. You could kind of compare this moment to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, during that scene where, he took out his lightsaber after looking into Kylo Ren's future. That's what this moment is kind of similar to. Essentially, after Rintaro gets his ass just handed to him, there's like a brief moment where he almost tries to stab his opponent in the back after his opponent essentially spares his life. Which I can't really say I blame him, and I can't even say I wouldn't do the same thing myself, but it's definitely a very different type of way. We usually don't see heroes go this type of direction. We always see like heroes defeat the villains, but the heroes always spare the villains, and then the villains try to attack the heroes when they have their backs turned. Here we get that, but the reverse. We have a moment where our hero actually tried to strike our villain in the back when the battle was already over. Of course, it doesn't work in his favor, as the villain just nonchalantly like walks off, completely avoiding the attack. But yeah, we get a real emotional scene with Rintaro, and I love this just because throughout the previous 5 episodes, he's always been very calm and kind of soft-spoken in a lot of ways. Really just kind of a nice dude overall, usually not letting emotions get the better of him. And even then, like in a couple of scenes where essentially he does kind of contemplate giving into some desire, specifically when it came to some of the sweets that May brought to work that one day, it's kind of played more for a gag and not because it's actually him letting his emotions get the better of him. This is the moment where we see that completely break, and it takes facing the guy who killed your master and not being able to avenge your master for him to, kind of fully break out of character and fully let his emotions engulf him. This was such an amazing scene, and you really do feel for him, especially having May on the battlefield with him, and I'm not trying to say she's not taking any of the situation seriously, but she's always had like such a all right, new adventure type of attitude when it comes to every mission, and I think this is a good wake-up call for her. It's her finally kind of getting a physical look on the fact that being a Kamen rider isn't exactly all fun and games. There is an actual danger to this whole thing. So I'm not saying I want her to change her personality at all, but hopefully she knows next time she's tagging along on one of these adventures that what the stakes can actually be, and she knows that there are times where essentially she should probably kind of ease back on the eccentric personality of hers. But that's just kind of my thought on that scene. I don't know if that is if anything with their characters are gonna change after this, but we'll have to wait and see in the next episode, I guess. But we do get one last scene, and that is that Touma does essentially figure out how to go to this hidden place, which is called, by the way, I actually took a note here, but I completely forgot. Avalon, that was the name of it. So they discovered that the hidden place that essentially Touma has to go to is a place called Avalon, and throughout the entire library in the North Pole, they finally find a book that gives them the right clue that they need in order to find it. They find out that there's a specific sword pattern that Touma has to do in order to unlock, I guess, the gate in order to go to this hidden world. I'm not sure if it's going to happen in the next episode, or what kind of sword you need in order to unlock this. Like I'm actually kind of wondering, would it even work with Toma's sword, because I mean it is kind of cursed, so it's not like he can even take it out of the belt. Or would he need to borrow a sword from one of the other riders? Would one of the other riders have to go into this place for Touma because Toma's unable to transform into a rider? I don't know, honestly. This was definitely they were kind of vague on the rules essentially when it comes to going to this hidden place and exactly what it is that they're going to find there. The only thing we really know for sure is that it is supposed to break the curse on Toma's henshin device, I'll say. But overall, guys, even though, man, I hated Ren, like I don't think I can emphasize that enough. I really wanted to punch Ren in the face so many times this episode. I still thought it was a good episode, and I really hope that Ren does mature as the show goes on, which I'm sure he will. If you know anything about Kamen Rider, you know that characters do tend to the writers tend to, and I don't mean writers, I mean writers with the W-R-I-T-E. They tend to write their certain characters, not all of them, of course, but some of their characters get written as unlikable just so they can make it for when the redemption kind of comes in, that they become so much more likable in the long run. And I feel like that's what they might do with Ren. However, I'm hoping they don't take their sweet time with it. I hope it doesn't take until like episode 40 when we finally get Ren being like a mature guy. I really hope it happens within the next 4 or 5 episodes, because man, I just didn't like Ren. I know, I've said that way too many times. Here's a drinking game. Take a shot every time I say I hate Ren in this episode. But yeah, at the end of the day, with that exception, I really did enjoy this episode. And if you guys didn't hate Ren as much as me, definitely let me know, because I'm actually kind of curious if I'm the only one who was this annoyed with his character throughout the whole episode. But also definitely let me know your thoughts on the episode overall. If you thought it was a good episode, if you enjoyed the Rintaro moments of him really giving into his emotions, that kind of stuff. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that, because again, these are just my A+ opinions, but at the end of the day, we always want to know what you guys think. So definitely hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. But guys, above all, just remember, keep it A+.